All right, good afternoon, everybody, both here in the audience with us as well as those who are viewing this online. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My name is James Taylor. I'm the CEO of Gaslight. I've been here for about 2 years, and I say that to say that we're talking about UX today and the importance of it. And when I first got here, I was coming from another industry. I was really trying to get the lay of the land as to what Gaslight did, what made us different. And I was talking to one of the designers one time and asked him to kind of talk me through what's the value of design. And the response has really stuck with me, and that's why I want to use this to kind of tee things up, is the response was, our customers are coming to us to solve a problem. And yes, we're writing custom software to do it, but have we really solved the problem if the user doesn't experience the solution? And that experience is the front end. It's what they're actually using day in and day out. So no matter what you do to solve a complicated problem with the development work, if you don't have a compelling user experience that brings somebody back to the using of your application, have you really even fundamentally solved the problem? Which has always stuck with me, and I think really speaks to why user experience is so important and why we're talking about it today. So with that, I would like to introduce Cristine Cravens. She is the VP of User Experience at Fifth Third Bank. If you're outside of the Cincinnati area, that is a pretty large regional bank here in the Midwest. And I believe there's other locations as well too. But I'd like to turn things over to her now to talk a little bit about what's going on from a user experience perspective over at Fifth Third. So great. Cristine, take it away.
Thank you. So just to do a little more introduction on myself, I have been in user experience for the past 20 years now. And it's been really fun going on the journey of watching the maturity of user experience, and also here in Cincinnati as well. And I've worked for a lot of different industries, including consumer packaged goods, retail, education, legal, and it's been exciting the last 2 years to return to financial services, which I've had now about five years experience in, to be able to look at these different industries, and a lot of the same foundational elements of what you need for a good user experience definitely hold true no matter what industry you're in. But today I wanted to focus more on financial services and where the opportunity is there for elevating the experience of our consumers. In addition to my role at Fifth Third, I'm also the Cincinnati chapter lead of the Interaction Design Association, which we founded here in Cincinnati about 9 years ago to really cultivate user experience within the region. And it's been amazing to me just how much that community has grown over these last 9 years. So today I'm going to dive into just looking at today, the shift in the landscape when it comes to banking, and how our consumers are gravitating toward mobile and expecting very customer-centric experiences. A look at the competitive landscape, and also talking about the importance of building trust with our consumers, how banks are evolving to the changes in the landscape, where I personally look to for inspiration when it comes to financial services, and then talking more about user experience itself and customer centricity. So looking today, there has definitely been a big shift in mobile in the last couple years, which may be surprising because people have had smartphones now for quite some time. But really when you look at the engagement they've had with mobile banking, when you compare it to other experiences different apps that they may have on their phone, mobile is just now in the last couple years really becoming more the primary way that consumers interact with their bank. And there can be a lot of reasons behind that. Just the overall personal privacy, security, and some of the things that people need to adapt to a little more slowly. And also the experiences themselves, which I'll talk about in a little bit too, is how can we make the mobile experience for banking better, that it's something that people do want to engage with. When you look at the stats, Forrester Technographic survey this year had said that 60% of consumers are now using mobile as a way that they'll engage with their bank. But when you look at Gen X and millennials, it's actually, for 70% of them, it's the preferred way that they interact with their bank. So when you look at this, mobile is really becoming much more in the spotlight of making that impact on customer satisfaction and also having a big impact on the loyalty that consumers will have with a bank. So it's really important to invest in that user experience. And a lot of what banks are starting to do as well is look at that user experience in addition to the features. And it's important to get a good balance of both. I think like just working for different industries when it comes to software development, there can be a big appetite for developing features and having the best like kind of feature set and getting parity or beating your competitors when it comes to a feature set standpoint. But it's really important to step back and think about the user experience as well and how big of an impact that will have on people's interactions with you and how much they're going to want to engage with you as well. It's also important to think about, even though mobile is becoming increasingly the most common touch point, to look at that full ecosystem and think about how can mobile work seamlessly with the different ways that our consumers are interacting with us. So whether people are walking into a retail branch once in a while or calling customer service or using online banking or even engaging with some of the marketing properties such as email campaigns or the website, all those have to feel very seamless to the user. Mobile is becoming more front and center, but you want that to feel like a very connected experience that really builds trust, even though it may be subliminal. It's something more in the back of consumers' minds that if you can have that consistent experience, a consistent design, remember who I am and be able to remember my data, it's really important to look across that whole ecosystem. When I work with new experiences with my team, it's always important to look at the competition and what our competitive set is doing, but it's also important to look out of industry. And I think it's definitely the case in financial services because we're really, I think as an industry as a whole, really working hard to evolve and catch up with the last best experience that consumers are having when they're engaging with other applications on their mobile phone. So I have here some examples, like when you even look at knowing who your target audience is, it's important to know like what are the common applications that they're engaging with on a regular basis, because you're competing with those experiences, not just other banks that they may be familiar with. So when I look at like Airbnb, for instance, Airbnb has a really engaging search capability. It can become very contextual, and they have a very good like exploratory feel to their site. And they work really hard to make it a very consistent experience. Amazon is really at the forefront of thinking about that full customer experience, about like every touch point consumers have with them, as well as thinking about on this site, they were really at the forefront of thinking about artificial intelligence, personalizing experiences for their end users, and recommending things for them. So when I think about financial services, the way we can continue to evolve is having that personalized experience, recommending relevant solutions for consumers, and helping them to manage their finances are some things that we can take away from Amazon. Netflix was an early disruptor with looking at how you can view your videos and TV shows, and they've continued to reinvent themselves over the years with personalized experiences that can be very relevant to the end consumer, and then also going to where the consumer is. So they've adapted to streaming and being able to easily access them, whether you're on your mobile phone, your tablet, a traditional TV. So they're able to adapt to that full ecosystem. And then when I look at OpenTable was featured as an app of the day a little while back, and they do a very good job with contextual geolocation and being able to get people in and out of those experiences very, very quickly and feel really good after you've engaged with them, that you've just made a very easy decision, because they really help make it for you. And thinking about that contextual piece, as well as the geolocation are some things that we can take away. And then also matching sites. So when you look at your target audience and some things that they may be engaging with, how are they getting personalization and these other experiences and recommendations for them? And then looking at our competitive set, it's always good to look at traditional banks, but also the online-only banks that are emerging, such as Ally and Simple. They're really capitalizing on being able to have a one-stop shop in the digital space and competitive parity, while also looking at that full user experience. One thing I really see as an opportunity in financial services, and one thing like I'd love for all of us in this industry to think about, is how can we build trust and value with our consumers? I do think that there is a lot to do there, where we do have good relationships with our consumers. But I think really getting them to trust us and showing them that we're sincere and being customer-centric is something that we are still as an industry working toward. In Ally, if you see their recent commercial, it just makes me cringe because I feel like they're really capitalizing on that. They are really looking at ways that fees or a very complex experience or feeling like the content or the experience is so complex that the consumer feels confused and maybe even taken advantage of. They're really capitalizing on that by showing that they have a very digital-first, consumer-centric experience that I believe financial services is working toward evolving to, but something that we need to continue to really make sincere headway in to really compete with these online-only banks. And some of the ways I do see that the banks in general are evolving are through an emphasis on customer experience. And so when you look at customer experience and compare that to user experience, customer experience looks at all the touch points that your consumer has with you and really making that a seamless journey for them. And it really looks at understanding your customers like user experience, that you're increasing the empathy and genuinely knowing who your customers are. So it's very important to get your teams out there, interacting with consumers, really building that empathy through conversations and understanding that you can then take that to help with your ideation in the direction you're going to go. And it's important to do that cross-functionally too. I really see the role of customer experience and user experience as being that advocate for the user, but then helping everyone cross-functionally to feel closer to the user and helping everyone to be more user-centric. Banks are also evolving by adopting new technologies. So accelerating, leveraging technology to bring convenience to consumers, really looking at security, how can we keep the fraudsters out and leverage things like biometrics, like with Touch ID, to make things more secure for our consumers. And then also looking at how we can innovate and really fast forward. And there's a lot of folks in the financial industry now like really looking to partner with fintechs and adapt to that, but also competing with them at the same time. And there's a lot to do there that technology can make our lives easier, especially when it comes to banking, and then continuing to look at how can we make consumers more comfortable with a new technology that may, in the long run, improve their lives. And that's where the trust factor comes in again as well. And then really making that seamless ecosystem. There are needs for a consumer to come in and talk to somebody in person and really have that personal interaction and personal touch, and especially for more complex needs that may come arise. So I think that's an advantage that traditional banks do have, that we do have our brick and mortar places, but continuing to look at how we can evolve those. I watched a webinar a little while ago talking about retail and how like the retail industry in general is reinventing themselves by creating more of an experience when you walk in, that it's not traditional, just like kind of walk up and shop for the things you need. They're looking at making that more of a holistic experience. And that's something I think we'll see banks do more of as well, is using that as a competitive advantage to build relationships with consumers and have it be very complementary and seamless with the mobile experience as well. And Amazon knows that too. When we saw them purchase Whole Foods, they were going after a certain target audience, looking to have that more a touch point with consumers, even though in a different context, that would be more face-to-face, and bringing that full ecosystem to life where they're bringing in the lockers that you can pick up purchases and things. And so that's just an example where I think that ecosystem will continue to morph and change, but will continue to be there as well. And when we look at actionable guidance, we can see this with some of the online banks as well, but really being able to leverage data. Banks have like a lot of rich data that they are really protecting to have better serve consumers, and how can we leverage that to help them better understand ways that they can meet their financial goals. Finances are a very personal thing for people, and it's also like a very personalized, where everybody has different goals, but my experience too, nobody ever feels like they're doing it right. Even the more savvy folks versus people who are more novices when it comes to managing their money, they always feel like they can do it better. So how can we make personalized experiences that really provide more of that actionable guidance for our consumers and show that we're really working to help them? And I'm really inspired to be in the financial industry. Just being in user experience, I think folks naturally want to do better and help people. That's why we're in this industry, so we can make better experiences. And I see a lot of opportunities that really inspire me and want to sincerely help consumers. And so really working to earn their trust, really demonstrate to them across these touch points that we are customer-centric in helping them understand. And then providing opportunity to truly help customers with their finances and delighting them. So how can we surprise and delight them by understanding them, doing that research, really knowing what they want, and then going above and beyond to really provide for them very engaging and memorable experiences that makes them want to engage with their bank and trust their bank on a regular basis. And then providing impact. So how can we help in their everyday lives better manage their money, manage their finances, and also looking to the long term? How can we make those bigger impacts? And then when you look at user experience specifically, we really want to see how we can provide value to our consumers. And when we look at mobile app development, whether it's Agile or Waterfall, we tend to work primarily in Agile at Fifth Third, but really a lot of the steps in a user-centered design process are the same. You do research, and it's important, like when you're looking at like a lean, agile environment, that you can focus in on like what are the areas that we need to know the most, like where are our biggest gaps. How can I build empathy with my teams, and do that research to really help understand who your target is for the experience, and then ideate. And it's important to do this cross-functionally with the team. There's a lot of methods out there. We leverage design thinking quite a bit at Fifth Third, and there's also other approaches just depending on the need, anything from design thinking to sketchboarding. There's a lot of techniques to really get people cross-functionally together within your organization. And even co-creating with consumers can be really powerful too. Getting people from the target audience in the room and being able to work with them to sketch out ideas and open their minds. It can really help people look at things in a new light. And then one of the mantras in user experience is to test early and often. So how can you work with the team to prototype ideas? And with UX, a lot of what we'll do is we'll start with what we call like low resolution wireframes that are more like skeletal. They don't have any visual design to them yet. But being able to put those in front of consumers, watch them interact with the experience, being able to react to priorities of communication, workflows, and things like that, and then continue to iterate and get in front of a few more users and and be able to continue going to like a higher resolution and interaction quality, that you're continuing to test with your users, where it's much easier, faster, and efficient to be able to do that iterative test and learn in that prototyping and design phase than to get it fully to like an engineering team. But there's definitely situations where you definitely want to keep learning once you've launched an experience. And so it's really important in the beginning of a project to have clear measurements of what success looks like, and as you get it out into the market, leverage analytics, A/B testing, multivariate testing to launch and learn from your consumers. And sometimes this can be done like doing a pilot, where you can do it with a smaller group of consumers and see how they engage with it, and then roll it out to a larger audience. And some experiences are better to have out in the wild than that you're not able to like kind of fully simulate in that early design phase. So it's always important to continue the iteration and continue the learning, and learning from consumers. And then just as an example, Fifth Third has a mobile app called Momentum, and this was created to help students pay down their student debt faster. And basically what they can do is take their ATM purchases and their debit card purchases, and they can round up so it can go directly into their student loan account. And so they can connect to the app to their student loan or student loans, and it will, as the purchases are round up, it'll transfer that money over to paying off their student debt, which has, as of July, it's helped customers pay down $1 million in student loan debt, just in the past year that it's been live. And that product came about from really thinking about like the target audience. How can we serve them in a way that's very sincere, and also there was co-creation done to help really think about what are some of the opportunities of where we can help people meet their goals, and so far has had a really great impact with our consumers. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you very much for running us through that. There's a lot of really interesting things in there. A couple questions come to mind. First, around user experience is all about understanding the user, putting yourself in their position and trying to solve the problem from their perspective. Mm-hmm. How do you guys, you mentioned a little bit about the research side of things, but maybe a little bit more tactically, how are you going and getting that research to understand the user?
It can be a combination of things. So really, like at first, it's good to think about like what need are we trying to solve for our consumers? And often we have like a hypothesis of what that is. It may be from feedback we're getting in the App Store, or customer service calls, or just opportunities that we're seeing in the industry in general. So it's always good to go and do research to better understand, like with real consumers, like how that can really come to fruition and get that inspiration from them. And it really depends on the situation and what you're trying to learn, what type of research should be done. And so it's always good to look at like what qualitative research can be done, which is always my favorite, because you get to have more of those one-on-one conversations with consumers, really get to understand them and get a lot of like really rich insights into their life. And so whether it's doing like interviews with them, building personas, sometimes it's just like kind of going in and observing them in their environment. Like with mobile, it's always good to think about like they may not be sitting there at a table interacting. They may be walking down the street or trying to make a payment and things. So always being able to be in that context and being able to build that empathy for what their environment is like and how you can help them is always good. And then quantitatively, it's always good to look at like surveys or other methods you can do to really get to like a broader reach of people. You don't get as in depth of data, but you're able to like really quantify it, especially if you have like a large group that you're working with. And we have tools to do both, like when we look at the testing piece of it, we can do moderated research or unmoderated to get to like a larger group in a shorter amount of time as well.
I love that you mentioned that you look for inspiration both in and outside the industry. I think it would be very easy just to look at what competitors are doing and try to decide from there what you should be focused on. How do you make those decisions? And what I mean by that to some extent is maybe you take something like a Momentum. Do you think about, okay, this is the target audience and these are the types of applications they're using, what are they doing? Or do you also maybe take into account, and maybe the answer is both to this, what's the problem we're solving? You talked about the open table application and how they did really interesting things with geofencing and geolocation. How do you start to think about solving those problems and getting inspiration from outside of your industry and deciding where to go?
Usually we'll get a group together to think about like focusing and aligning on like who is our audience, and for Momentum the target was millennials as the primary target, and then being able to do some like whether it's research with that particular audience. Sometimes there's good secondary research available too. That you can kind of go on and search like for the audience I'm looking at. What are the top apps that they're engaging with today? Why are they looking at those experiences? And even just doing some, like as we look at Agile, doing some like ad hoc research. So if you know some folks in that like target audience, that age group, just kind of going out and talking to some folks and understanding like what are you engaging with and why. Like what I always love asking them like what was your last memorable experience like interacting with a mobile app, because you can get some really interesting stories of how people were delighted and how that really builds loyalty and resonates in their mind, that it gives people something to inspire to. Really the inspiration piece I think is the most important thing when you look at the competitive set, not just like how can we get parity when you're looking, which I think happens a lot when you look in industry, but also kind of how can you think broader and raise the bar by just looking at that full set of experiences.
So there's something else I found very interesting. You talk a lot about trust, and there's an opportunity to build trust through technology, and I completely agree. At the same time, though, you work in kind of just like we do here at Gaslight, a lean, agile methodology. Especially with you guys being in the financial service industry, I feel like there could be a potential risk of going to market too quickly and eroding some of that trust. I mean, when we talk lean and agile, we hear things like fail fast. If you've waited, if you're not embarrassed by what you put out there, you've waited too long. Do you think about those things? And if so, how do you balance them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think it's definitely want to always think about the security and put that in mind on top of release dates. With Agile, we do look at like regular releases, but it's always important to make sure things are thoroughly tested. And we really like look to a balance of like what kind of internal test and learn can we do iteratively throughout the experience, like when we think about a user experience standpoint, that we're getting input from folks, but then also from a security standpoint, it's extremely important to make sure that we're launching with something that's secure. And so a lot of our we have specialists that focus on that piece in particular, and really making sure that we're validating from like a security standpoint, whether it's partnering with proven technologies, and really making sure that we have like a due diligence QA process, because more and more, I forget the exact figure, but the amount that people are spending on fraud is about quadruple like what banks can spend on keeping them out. So it's really important to stay very diligent on that and making sure, and I do think that is very like top of mind, and one of the biggest concerns is just making sure that whatever we launch with is very secure, fully vetted, and helps our consumers.
When you talked about the kind of lean agile process, you mentioned cross-functional teams. How are things structured from a UX perspective at Fifth Third?
So we have people, we use the tribes and squad model that Spotify uses, where we do have dedicated user experience designers on our squads or our agile teams. And I really feel like that gives a strong advantage where you work very closely cross-functionally with the team and can be that consumer advocate on the team, and then helping everybody else like really build that empathy for our end users. We also have people that are are pulled outside of the squads and are thinking about the bigger picture of the experience. So we have folks looking at like that full journey that our consumers have with us, and really looking at how can we make more of a consistent, engaging experience across all of our digital touch points. So we look at like really a combination of having some like specialists, because there is a lot to user experience when it comes to research, visual design, even having some specialty in mobile. And so we do have some folks that like sit outside and are thinking more of that big picture, and then collaborating really closely with the rest of the UX team. Because organizationally we're all together. Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of the overall customer journey and all the touch points. Is there anything you can share as to what you guys are working on to kind of bring those touch points more together? Mobile, I don't know if you, and also maybe a tail end of this too, and what's some ideas to maybe the evolution of the brick and mortar sites over time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't share a whole lot of details, but I can talk at a high level. Like we're really focusing, and there's been a lot of really exciting support throughout the organization with our senior leadership too, of really like elevating user experience, being committed to understanding our consumers in a deeper level, and how can we provide a more consistent and engaging experience across the touch points, including mobile. And so we work really closely with our customer experience and omnichannel teams just to think about all the touch points, and how can we provide something very seamless, and then also having like a consistent design language, because as I mentioned earlier, like there's a lot of very subliminal thinking that goes through someone's head when they emotionally react to a design and to an experience, and so making sure that we have consistency in that is something we're looking at.
Fantastic. With that, I think we have a little bit more time left. I'll open things up to anybody in the audience if they would like to ask a question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Whether things are working once they launch or not working, like I think it's always good to go back and revisit that phase. So while it kind of looks linear in that diagram, it should be kind of more of a very iterative process where to continue like reinventing and doing better, it's always and one of the things I really like about working in like a corporate environment versus some of the other environments I worked on too is that over time you get when you're working with the same target audience, you can continue to like build that internal like repository of like how much you know about them. And of course people's needs change over time, and you got to continue that iterative research, but it's nice that you can continue to build on, well, I did a little bit of research here with this phase, I'm going to go back and learn more and really dive in deeper into this specific area. That you can continue to build like your understanding of your consumers in a deeper way over time. And so it's always good to constantly go back to that research and discovery phase. Anytime you're starting like a new initiative, new feature set, it's always good, and it's always good to adapt the size of it too, because sometimes you have like a bigger initiative that you're working on, and it's going to take a longer discovery phase, and do more like with design thinking and maybe multiple days, whereas maybe you're just like kind of tweaking a feature set, didn't work right, let's go and do some more testing and go out and talk to customers, understanding what's going on, and iterate. So really it's important to scale it to how big the problem is and how big the audience is, that you can get to like a representative group and be agile in that sense too.
Any other questions? All right. If there's there's no other questions, I think that's it for right now. Thank you very much for your time, Cristine. It was a pleasure to have you, and we'd like to do it again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.